It was a regular Tuesday morning when everything changed for Jordan Mitchell. He wasn't expecting it. No one was. But when the results of the final exam came back, it shocked everyone, especially his teacher. Jordan had always been the quiet kid. The one who kept to himself, tucked in the back corner of the classroom. The kind of student who blended into the background, never asking for attention, never demanding to be noticed. And he was okay with that. In fact, he preferred it that way. The less people knew about him, the better. The moment the class settled in and Ms. Anderson, his English teacher, began handing back the exams, Jordan's heart began to race. He didn't know why, after all, it was just a test. A test he hadn't studied for as much as he should have. He never really did study as much as his classmates, he just knew things, and that was enough. That had always been enough. As Ms. Anderson walked toward his desk, Jordan looked at the stack of papers in her hands. She was smiling as she approached each student, but when she reached Jordan, her expression changed. It was subtle, but it was there, a brief flash of confusion that Jordan couldn't quite place. "Jordan," she said, her voice unsteady, "you're not cheating, are you?" Jordan's stomach dropped, and he felt the blood rush to his face. "Cheating? Excuse me?" he asked, barely able to form the words. Ms. Anderson glanced down at his test score, a perfect 100%. His heart pounded faster. That wasn't the shocking part. Jordan was smart, always had been, but he never expected it to be this noticeable, this undeniable. But Ms. Anderson wasn't thinking about Jordan's intelligence, she was thinking about how impossible it seemed that someone like him could score that high. He wasn't exactly a model student in her eyes. He didn't participate in class discussions, rarely turned in homework on time, and always seemed to keep to himself. So how, in the world, did he manage to get a perfect score? Jordan stammered, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I didn't cheat." Ms. Anderson studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing as if searching for something in his face that would explain the mystery of his perfect score. After a few seconds, she shook her head, as though to say, "I'll let it slide this time," but her skepticism was clear. "All right," she said slowly, "but let's make sure this never happens again, okay?" Jordan nodded, his mind racing. What was she thinking? Did she really believe he was cheating? This was a test he'd aced without a second thought. But there it was, his classmates were staring at him. The looks they gave him weren't filled with admiration, no, they were filled with suspicion. How could a kid like Jordan do so well? He could feel their eyes burning into his back as he quietly folded his test paper and shoved it into his backpack. It wasn't a new feeling. He'd felt it his whole life, people watching, people questioning his abilities, doubting him because of his background. He knew the drill. He knew how to stay quiet and out of the way. But that perfect score. It was hard to ignore. The bell rang, signaling the end of class. Jordan grabbed his things quickly, trying to escape the whispers that were already starting to ripple through the room. He wasn't in the mood for confrontation. He wasn't in the mood for anything that would put him in the spotlight. As he walked out of the classroom, he was immediately met by his best friend, Emily. She was standing by the door, tapping her foot impatiently, waiting for him. "Yo, Jordan," she called out, grinning. "What was that about in there? 100%. You got the highest score in the class." And she totally looked like she didn't believe it. Jordan let out a sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. "She thinks I cheated. I'm sure of it." Emily's expression softened. "What? No way. You don't cheat. You know that test inside and out. It's just." "I know," Jordan said, cutting her off. "It's just that she can't believe someone like me could score that high. She's always thought I was. I don't know, just another kid who barely passed." "Well, screw her," Emily said, her voice filled with conviction. "Everyone knows you're smart, Jordan. You've been acing tests like that since, like, forever. Don't let her get into your head. You did great. Jordan smiled weakly, though his chest still felt tight. He appreciated Emily's support, but there was a part of him that couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just about the test or Ms. Anderson's disbelief. It was something deeper, a feeling he couldn't put into words. As he walked through the hallways with Emily, he overheard his classmates talking, their voices low but filled with curiosity. They were wondering how he could have pulled off such a perfect score. Some seemed impressed, but most just seemed baffled. And that was the thing. Jordan had always been underestimated. People looked at him, a black kid from a working-class neighborhood, and assumed he didn't have what it took. They assumed he was average, or maybe even below average. But the truth was, Jordan was anything but average. He was brilliant. His mind worked differently, faster, sharper, and that was something he couldn't help. But it was also something he couldn't always show. Not without raising suspicion. Not without making people uncomfortable. Are you going to the park later? Emily asked, breaking his train of thought. I'm not sure, Jordan replied, distracted. I need some time to think about all this. Emily gave him a sideways look. You're overthinking it. You know you nailed that test. Who cares what they think? Jordan couldn't answer. He didn't know how to explain it to her, the way his mind was racing, the way he felt like the world was just waiting for him to screw up, to fail. He couldn't let them see his brilliance, not fully. Because if he did, it would just make them question him even more. As the day went on, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken a turn. Something had shifted, and he wasn't sure if it was for the better or for the worse. But one thing was for sure, he couldn't go back. He couldn't hide anymore. He'd proved he was more than anyone had given him credit for. And now, the real test was about to begin. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jordan Mitchell was never the type of kid who liked to stand out. In fact, he preferred the opposite, blending in, staying under the radar, and quietly observing the world around him. His life had been a constant dance with expectations and stereotypes that never seemed to match who he truly was. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, his surroundings were filled with people struggling to make ends meet. His mother, Lisa, worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment running smoothly. She was his rock, and everything Jordan did, every test he aced, every obstacle he overcame, was for her. Lisa Mitchell was the kind of woman who believed in the power of persistence. She'd always told Jordan that no matter where life took him, no matter the odds stacked against him, he had the ability to change his fate. She would sit with him in their cramped living room after long days of work, helping him with his homework even though her own education was limited. She didn't have a college degree or any formal training beyond high school, but what she lacked in academic experience, she made up for in wisdom. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something because of where you come from, she would say, brushing his hair out of his eyes as she helped him with his math problems. You're smarter than you think, Jordan. You're capable of way more than what they expect of you. Jordan never really believed her. He didn't feel smart. Not in the way the other kids in school did. The kids whose parents were doctors, lawyers, or professors. They seemed so polished, so confident, and they never seemed to doubt their place in the world. Jordan, on the other hand, felt like an outsider, someone who didn't belong in that world. He spent his days trying to fit in, keeping his head down, avoiding attention. He was good at math, sure, and could breeze through most of his schoolwork without much effort, but he never flaunted it. He was quiet. And as a black kid in a predominantly white school, being quiet was often seen as a flaw. He'd learned early on that it was easier to be underestimated than to be seen as a threat. He kept his talents hidden, even from his closest friends, because every time he showed too much of his ability, it just made others uncomfortable. Teachers assumed he wasn't that bright because he didn't ask questions or answer everyone in class. His classmates saw him as a quiet kid who, despite his obvious intelligence, didn't seem to participate in their world. He didn't have the flashy personality of the other kids who were popular, and he didn't speak up as much in group activities. But the truth was, Jordan had always been a thinker, a silent observer, who kept his thoughts to himself. His closest friend, Emily, was one of the few people who had always seen through his quiet exterior. They had been friends since middle school, when they were paired together for a history project. Emily was outgoing, confident, and always up for an adventure, but she had a soft spot for Jordan. She never judged him for being quiet or reserved. In fact, she admired his ability to solve complex problems without breaking a sweat. "I don't get how you do it, Jordan," Emily would say, shaking her head after watching him breeze through a difficult algebra problem. "You make it look so easy." Jordan would just shrug, smiling faintly. "I guess it just makes sense to me," he would say. But it wasn't just math that made sense to Jordan. It was everything. He had an uncanny ability to absorb information, connect dots in ways that seemed to elude others. History, science, literature, whatever subject he focused on, Jordan excelled. He could read an entire chapter in a textbook and absorb every detail without breaking a sweat. Teachers would sometimes pull him aside after class to ask how he had done so well, but Jordan just smiled and shrugged it off. It wasn't that Jordan didn't want to stand out. It wasn't that he didn't yearn for recognition. But the world didn't seem ready to see him for what he truly was, a kid with a mind far beyond his years. And so, he kept his brilliance hidden, wrapping it in layers of self-doubt and insecurity, never quite able to share it with the world. At home, things were different. His mother always believed in him. She would watch him read books late into the night, asking him questions about what he'd learned, encouraging him to think bigger, dream bigger. She'd sit with him, letting him explain his ideas, even when she didn't fully understand them herself. To her, Jordan was capable of anything. He could be anything he wanted, no matter what anyone else said or thought. She never questioned his intelligence, never doubted his potential. But even with his mother's unwavering belief in him, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that the world was holding him back. Every day, he would watch his classmates struggle with problems that seemed so easy to him. He saw them working hard to get the grades he could easily achieve with minimal effort. And it frustrated him. He wasn't sure what frustrated him more, the fact that others didn't understand him or the fact that he was too afraid to let them in on his secret. Jordan's life was one of quiet isolation. He was surrounded by people, but no one really saw him. Not the way his mother did. Not the way he wished he could be seen. He wasn't just a shy kid, he was someone with the potential to be great, someone with a mind that could change the world if only he had the courage to let it show. But so far, that courage had been lacking. That's why the test results that day had thrown him for a loop. He had always kept his abilities hidden, his intelligence a quiet part of himself that he only shared with the pages of his textbooks. But now, it had been laid bare for all to see. The perfect score, the shock in Ms. Anderson's eyes, Jordan couldn't escape it. And for the first time, he was left wondering if his mother was right all along. Maybe he was capable of more than he thought. Maybe he didn't have to hide his brilliance anymore. But as he walked through the crowded hallways of school that day, the whispers from his classmates followed him. How could a kid like Jordan do so well? Wasn't he just the quiet one? Did he cheat? For the first time, Jordan wondered if he was ready for the world to see him for who he truly was. But one thing was for sure, everything was about to change. As the days passed, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. The whispers around him were louder now, their curiosity thickening the air in every hallway he walked through. His classmates were talking, debating, and wondering how he had managed to score a perfect 100% on the test. It was the first time in his life that his intelligence had been impossible to ignore, and the world, his world, wasn't quite sure how to handle it. Ms. Anderson, who had never once singled him out before, started to pay more attention to him. She'd ask questions that seemed oddly pointed, as if she was trying to gauge how far his abilities truly extended. At first, Jordan had brushed it off, thinking it was just her trying to understand how he'd pulled off such an unexpected feat, but soon enough, her constant questions made him uneasy. She was looking for something beyond just academic performance. It felt less like genuine curiosity and more like suspicion. He noticed her talking with the other teachers more often after class, whispering among themselves, glancing in his direction. It was subtle, but Jordan knew exactly what it was. They were trying to figure him out. Trying to understand why a quiet, seemingly average student could have blown their expectations out of the water. It didn't help that some of his classmates were beginning to treat him differently, too. There were the ones who had never spoken to him much before but now were suddenly eager to strike up conversations. Then there were the others, the ones who had always thought he was just there, and now they were eyeing him with doubt and curiosity, wondering if he had somehow tricked them. Some whispered behind his back, questioning his motives. Some didn't even try to hide it, asking him outright, "Did you cheat on that test?" Jordan, who had been trained for years to be invisible, felt his world crumbling around him. No matter how much he tried to avoid it, no matter how much he wanted to remain under the radar, his intelligence was like a bright light that couldn't be hidden anymore. One afternoon, as Jordan was sitting at lunch, trying to enjoy a quiet moment in the corner of the cafeteria, Emily slid into the seat next to him. Her bright smile was a welcome contrast to the tension he'd been feeling all day. "You all right?" she asked, already noticing the way he was picking at his food rather than eating it. "I don't know, Jordan replied, shaking his head. "It's just, all this attention. It's getting to be too much. I didn't ask for any of this." Emily leaned back in her seat, glancing around the cafeteria, then focusing her gaze on him. "Jordan, you're smarter than anyone in this school. And everyone's finally starting to realize it. Don't let their reactions mess with your head. They're confused, sure, but that doesn't mean you have to explain yourself to anyone." Jordan frowned, running a hand through his hair. "It's not about them. It's about me. I didn't want to be noticed. I just wanted to get by, you know. But now. It's like I'm this freak show." Emily scoffed. "A freak show? Please. You've been hiding in plain sight for years. You're smart, Jordan. You don't need to apologize for that. You've worked hard for it. It's time to own it." Jordan didn't respond. Part of him wanted to agree with her, but another part of him couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation. The more people noticed him, the harder it became to stay invisible. The more people began to question how he had gotten such a perfect score, the more he began to question himself. Was he really just lucky? Or was there something more to his intelligence that he had been hiding for so long? Could he truly be the genius everyone was starting to say he was? And if he was, what did that even mean for him? The next day in class, Jordan felt the weight of the spotlight more than ever. Ms. Anderson's eyes followed him, her gaze lingering as she wrote notes on the board. She was trying to catch his attention, trying to pull him out of his shell. But Jordan wasn't ready. He didn't want to be the center of attention. He didn't want to be the object of their fascination. It wasn't long before she called on him during a class discussion. "Jordan," she said, her voice almost too casual. "Can you explain this concept for the class? I'm sure you have a unique perspective." The class grew quiet, every pair of eyes turning toward him. Jordan felt his palms start to sweat. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He knew the answer. He always knew the answer. But in that moment, with all eyes on him, the pressure was overwhelming. He stood up, his mind racing for a moment before he spoke. "The answer is, well, it's actually pretty simple. You just need to break it down into smaller parts." He glanced around the room, trying to gauge the reaction. He could see the other students nodding, some scribbling notes. But others still had that look on their faces. That look of confusion, skepticism, and even fear. Fear of what? Of him? Of his abilities? Ms. Anderson raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed, but also slightly taken aback. That's a very insightful explanation, Jordan. I'm surprised you didn't share this during the earlier discussion. Jordan shrugged, his gaze dropping to the desk. He hadn't wanted to share. He hadn't wanted to stand out. But now it felt like he couldn't hide anymore. After class, as Jordan packed up his things, Ms. Anderson approached him. Her face was serious, her usual smile replaced with something more calculated. "Jordan," she said, her tone softer than before, "I think we need to have a chat after school. There are some things I'd like to discuss." Jordan felt his stomach churn. He knew exactly what she wanted to talk about. It wasn't just the test score. It was him. She wanted to know why he wasn't living up to his potential, why he was hiding his talents, why he didn't fit the mold of the average student. She wanted to dig deeper. And Jordan wasn't sure he was ready for that. As the bell rang and students filed out of the room, Jordan hesitated. For the first time, he wasn't sure what was coming next. For the first time, he didn't know how to hide anymore. "Jordan." Ms. Anderson's voice broke through his thoughts. He looked up, meeting her eyes, and nodded. "Yeah. I'll be there," he said quietly. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that his world was about to change forever. The afternoon bell rang, signaling the end of another long school day. Jordan gathered his things, feeling the weight of the conversation with Ms. Anderson pressing heavily on his mind. He had been trying to distract himself throughout the day, picking at his lunch, zoning out in class, and avoiding conversations with his classmates, but he couldn't escape it now. The meeting was inevitable. He had no choice but to face whatever Ms. Anderson had planned. As he made his way to the teacher's lounge, a strange knot formed in his stomach. His palms were slick with sweat, and his heart was beating a little faster than normal. Why was this so nerve-wracking? He had always been the quiet kid, the one who blended into the background, but now everything was different. People were starting to look at him in ways they never had before, as if he was something more than just another student. When Jordan arrived at the lounge, Ms. Anderson was already sitting at one of the small tables, her arms crossed and a clipboard resting in front of her. She looked up as he entered, her expression unreadable. "Jordan, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Please, sit." Jordan hesitated for a moment, then sat down, his body stiff with unease. "You wanted to talk to me about the test results?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Ms. Anderson nodded, but there was something in her eyes that wasn't just about the test. "It's more than just that, Jordan. I've been observing you for a while now, and I think we need to discuss some things that have been going on in this school." Jordan swallowed, trying to steady his breath. "What do you mean?" "Jordan, you're not just any student," Ms. Anderson began, leaning forward slightly. "Your intelligence, your natural ability to understand complex concepts and solve problems quickly, it's rare. And I've seen students like you before. But what I'm concerned about is that you're not living up to your potential. I've seen you hold back, stay in the shadows, and avoid stepping into the spotlight." "Why?" Jordan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had been preparing for something like this, but hearing it out loud, from a teacher who was supposed to be a mentor, made it feel even more real. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the table. "I didn't want to be the center of attention. I just wanted to get through high school without anyone noticing me." Ms. Anderson's expression softened. "I understand that, Jordan. But you're at a point now where hiding your abilities isn't going to serve you. People are noticing. And whether you like it or not, you're going to be called upon to do more than just what's expected. And I believe you can handle it." Jordan felt his chest tighten. The pressure was mounting, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always been able to hide his true abilities, to stay under the radar and remain just another face in the crowd. But now, the world was demanding more of him. And he didn't know if he was ready for that. "I don't know if I can do this," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if I fail? What if people expect too much from me? What if I'm not enough?" Ms. Anderson leaned back in her chair, studying him with a calm, measured gaze. "Failure is a part of life, Jordan. It's how we grow, how we learn. But hiding from the possibility of failure won't help you. You're not going to fail because you can't handle it. You'll fail if you refuse to try. If you don't allow yourself to see what you're capable of." Jordan's mind raced. He couldn't ignore the truth in her words. But could he really step into the light, let everyone see him for who he was? Could he stop being the kid in the back of the class and allow himself to be the one who stood in front? "I've seen students like you before," Ms. Anderson continued, her voice firm but encouraging. "They don't always believe in themselves. They don't always believe they're capable of the things they're asked to do. But once they realize their own potential, once they embrace it, they're unstoppable. And I believe you can be that student, Jordan. You just have to be willing to take that first step." Jordan sat in silence, processing her words. The room felt smaller now, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. He had spent his whole life hiding, avoiding the spotlight. But maybe, just maybe, it was time for him to stop running from his own potential. "All right," he said finally, his voice steadying as he spoke. "I'll do it. I'll try. But, what if I mess up?" Ms. Anderson smiled warmly, a hint of pride in her eyes. "That's the point, Jordan. You're going to mess up. And that's okay. But you're also going to learn, and you're going to grow. And I'll be here to help you every step of the way." Jordan nodded, feeling a weight lifting off his shoulders. For the first time in a long while, he felt something close to hope. Maybe it wouldn't be easy. Maybe he would fall. But the journey, the challenge, it felt worth it. For the first time, he didn't feel so afraid of his own brilliance. As he left the teacher's lounge, his thoughts were still racing. What was next? How would his classmates react when they saw him step up? But for the first time in a long time, he wasn't worried about the answers to those questions. He was ready for the challenge ahead. Ready to prove to himself, and to everyone else, that he was more than just the quiet kid in the back of the class. His journey had only just begun. The next few days were a whirlwind of new experiences for Jordan. He found himself struggling to adjust to his newfound role. It wasn't just the constant attention from his classmates or the weight of Ms. Anderson's expectations. It was the overwhelming sense that something had changed inside him, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. He was no longer the quiet kid in the back of the classroom, blending into the background. Now, people looked at him as if he were someone special, someone extraordinary. But the more they stared, the more Jordan wanted to shrink back into the shadows. It wasn't just the students who had their eyes on him now. The entire school seemed to have taken notice. Teachers were asking him questions, seeking his input during class discussions, and even assigning him group leadership roles. The school's top students, those who had always been at the forefront of academic excellence, began to look at him with a mix of admiration and, oddly enough, suspicion. They were starting to wonder, how did he do it? Jordan wasn't sure how to feel about all the attention. Part of him was proud of what he had accomplished, proud that his hard work had finally paid off in such a big way. But another part of him felt terrified. What if he couldn't live up to the expectations? What if he failed? What if the people around him, especially Ms. Anderson, were disappointed when they saw that he couldn't maintain the same level of brilliance he had shown on that one test? It all came to a head during the school's first major academic competition of the year, the annual Brain Bowl. The event was a highly anticipated contest where students from all grades competed in teams to solve complex problems, answer trivia questions, and demonstrate their intellectual prowess. Jordan had always watched from the sidelines in the past, too nervous to participate, but now, with all eyes on him, it felt like the perfect moment to prove himself. But there was a catch. He had been asked to join the senior team. The team that had always won the Brain Bowl. The team that was undefeated. And suddenly, Jordan felt like he had stepped into a whole new world. A world where success wasn't just about personal achievement, it was about carrying the weight of everyone's expectations on your shoulders. He could feel the pressure mounting. His classmates, his teachers, they were all watching him. Watching to see if the quiet, unassuming kid could handle being thrust into the spotlight. It was too much. That afternoon, as he sat with the team in the library, preparing for the big event, Jordan couldn't help but feel out of place. The seniors were confident, joking with one another and tossing out quick answers to practice questions, while Jordan sat in the back, lost in his thoughts. "I still can't believe they picked you, man," one of the seniors, Ryan, said with a grin, his tone a mix of surprise and admiration. "You really blew everyone away with that test score. I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got in the Brain Bowl." Jordan didn't know how to respond. He smiled awkwardly, but his mind was racing. What if he froze? What if he didn't know the answers? What if they all realized that he wasn't as smart as they thought? Ms. Anderson had come by earlier to check in on the team, offering words of encouragement. "Remember, Jordan, it's not just about winning. It's about showing what you're truly capable of. You're going to do great. Trust yourself." But trust wasn't easy for Jordan. He had always been able to blend into the background, to avoid standing out, to avoid letting anyone see how vulnerable he truly felt. But now, with the whole school watching, he didn't have that luxury anymore. The day of the Brain Bowl arrived, and Jordan stood backstage with the rest of the team, his heart hammering in his chest. The stage was set, the lights were blinding, and the auditorium was packed with students, teachers, and parents. The buzz of excitement filled the air, and Jordan could barely hear himself think over the noise. His teammates were all relaxed, preparing for the competition with their usual confidence. Ryan slapped him on the back and grinned. "You got this, man. We're gonna win. Just do your thing." Jordan nodded, but the knot in his stomach tightened. What if his thing wasn't enough? As they stepped onto the stage, the spotlight hit them, and the noise of the crowd seemed to fade away. The pressure was suffocating, but Jordan had no choice but to push through. The first few rounds went by in a blur. Questions about history, science, and math were fired at them one after the other. Jordan answered a few, surprised at how easily the answers came to him. His teammates cheered him on, their support buoying his confidence just enough to keep going. But then came the final round. The question that would decide the winner of the entire competition. The host read the question aloud: "What is the derivative of the natural logarithm of x?" Jordan's heart stopped. He knew the answer. He knew it. But his mind suddenly went blank. The audience's eyes felt like daggers, and for the first time in his life, Jordan couldn't remember a single thing. His brain was paralyzed, the weight of everyone's expectations too heavy to bear. The seconds stretched on like hours. He could feel the pressure mounting. His teammates were looking at him, waiting for him to answer. And yet, all he could do was stare at the podium, his mind a complete blank. And then, something inside him shifted. He could hear Ms. Anderson's voice echoing in his mind: "Trust yourself, Jordan. You've got this. You can handle it." With a deep breath, Jordan forced himself to calm down. He could do this. He had to. "I'll answer," Jordan said, his voice steady, though his heart was still racing. He stepped forward, pushing through the fear that threatened to choke him, and blurted out the answer: "The derivative is 1 over x." The audience went silent for a moment. Then, There was a loud burst of applause. The answer was correct. Jordan's teammates erupted in cheers, lifting him up in excitement. He could barely believe it. He had done it. He had faced his fear, trusted himself, and succeeded. The feeling of relief that washed over him was almost overwhelming. He had stepped into the unknown, confronted his own doubts, and come out victorious. And in that moment, he realized something. He wasn't just a student who had been hiding in the background. He was someone who could rise to the challenge. He was someone who could face his fears head-on, and win. The rest of the team gathered around him, clapping him on the back. Ryan grinned. "Told you we had the best guy for the job." Jordan looked around at his teammates, his heart swelling with a new sense of pride. He wasn't just a kid anymore. He was someone who had earned their respect, someone who had proven to himself that he was capable of greatness. For the first time in a long time, Jordan felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The days after the Brain Bowl were a blur of celebration. The entire school seemed to be buzzing with the news that the team had won again, with Jordan playing a pivotal role. His classmates, who had once seen him as just another quiet face in the crowd, now looked at him differently. There were no more whispers behind his back, no more awkward silences. Instead, people were approaching him, congratulating him, asking for his help with homework or projects. Even the teachers, who had once only offered polite smiles and short conversations, now made an effort to stop and chat with him. Jordan found it all overwhelming. In the span of just a few weeks, everything in his life had changed. The quiet world he had known, the one where he could go unnoticed, seemed to be slipping away. For a moment, he wondered if he had made a mistake by stepping into the spotlight. Was he really ready for this? Could he handle the pressure of living up to everyone's expectations, especially Ms. Anderson's? But as he sat alone in his room that evening, reflecting on everything that had happened, Jordan began to realize something important. This wasn't just about winning the Brain Bowl, or impressing his classmates, or proving a point. This was about him, his journey, his growth, and the lessons he had learned along the way. He had faced his fears, taken a risk, and, most importantly, had learned to trust himself. And while he still felt the weight of expectations, he now understood that it wasn't about being perfect. It was about giving his best, stepping forward even when he was scared, and accepting that failure was just a part of the process. The next day, Ms. Anderson caught him after class. He had expected the usual congratulatory words, but instead, she asked him something he hadn't expected. "Jordan, how do you feel about all of this? All the attention, the success. Does it feel like something you want to continue?" Jordan had been prepared for another pep talk, but her question made him stop and think. He had never really thought about the future in those terms, about what he wanted for himself beyond the next test, the next competition, the next moment of validation. "I don't know," he said slowly, shrugging. "It's all been a little overwhelming. I've been kind of caught up in the moment, to be honest." Ms. Anderson nodded thoughtfully. "That's completely normal. But I want you to think about what you really want, Jordan. Do you want to keep pushing yourself to be the best? Or is there something else that matters more to you?" Jordan was quiet for a moment, his mind spinning. What did he want? The truth was, he didn't have all the answers. He wasn't sure if he wanted to become a famous scientist or mathematician, or if he even wanted to continue with academic competitions at all. He was starting to realize that there was more to life than just being the smartest person in the room. "I guess I just want to do something that feels right," he said finally, meeting her gaze. "Something that makes me feel like I'm making a difference." Ms. Anderson smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. "I think that's a great answer, Jordan. And I think you're on the right track. You've already shown what you're capable of. Now, it's about finding what matters most to you, and following that path." That conversation stuck with Jordan long after the school year ended. As he moved forward, he knew that his journey was far from over. The pressure to succeed, to meet everyone's expectations, would always be there, but he had learned to silence that voice in his head that said he wasn't enough. He had learned that true success wasn't measured by accolades or praise, but by the quiet satisfaction of knowing you gave your best, no matter what the outcome. Jordan didn't have all the answers. But for the first time, he felt comfortable with that uncertainty. He was beginning to understand that it wasn't about being perfect or having all the right answers, it was about embracing the journey, and finding his own way forward. As the school year came to a close, Jordan found himself walking across the stage at graduation, a sense of peace settling over him. He wasn't the same person who had entered the school that first day, unsure of his own abilities, hiding behind his books and his fears. He had grown. He had learned. He had stepped into the light, and, more importantly, he had learned to trust himself. As he received his diploma, Jordan felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had proven to himself that he was capable of far more than he had ever imagined. And that was enough. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, he was ready to face it with open arms. He didn't need to have everything figured out. What mattered was that he had the courage to move forward, to continue learning, and to keep growing. Graduation came and went in a whirlwind of emotions, and before Jordan knew it, he was standing at the threshold of something entirely new, the world beyond high school. The halls of his school had grown quiet, and the once constant buzz of activity and excitement faded into a distant memory. For the first time in years, Jordan found himself with no clear path, no set goals, just an overwhelming sense of uncertainty about what came next. He wasn't just a student anymore. He was an individual, free to make choices, but the weight of that freedom felt heavier than he anticipated. As summer began to unfold, Jordan spent his days reflecting on everything he had learned over the past few years. The pressure to excel academically, the spotlight that had once seemed so overwhelming, the friendships he had forged, and the quiet, yet powerful moments of personal growth, he thought about it all. But one question kept circling in his mind: what did he truly want? For years, Jordan had been a passive participant in life, letting others set the pace. Ms. Anderson had encouraged him to follow his heart, to explore what truly made him happy, but it wasn't an easy thing for him to do. It wasn't something he had ever really learned how to do. The constant push to prove himself, to live up to other people's expectations, had often clouded his own sense of self. Now, standing at the edge of a new chapter, he felt the weight of that uncertainty more than ever. He wasn't sure what his future would look like. The traditional paths that others around him were following, college, career, family, seemed so clear to them. But for Jordan, the future was a vast, open road with no signs, no map. And that scared him. He spent hours in his room, staring at his computer screen, scrolling through endless lists of college options, job opportunities, and internships. Nothing seemed to fit. He wanted to do something that made a difference, but what was that? What kind of difference could someone like him really make in the world? Jordan had been praised for his intellect, for his ability to absorb information and solve complex problems, but he hadn't yet figured out how to turn that into something meaningful. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that it wasn't just about intellect, it was about passion. He wanted to find something he cared about, something that would push him to be better, not because it was expected of him, but because it was something he truly believed in. It was then that he remembered the project he had started working on during his senior year, an after-school program to help underprivileged students improve their academic skills. It had started as just an idea, a way to give back to his community, but over the course of the year, it had grown into something bigger. Jordan had worked with a team of volunteers to create tutoring sessions, workshops on study skills, and even mentorship programs for students who had potential but lacked the resources to succeed. The program had been a success, and Jordan had felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. It wasn't about accolades or awards. It was about helping others. It was about making a real, tangible difference in someone's life. As he reflected on that experience, Jordan realized something: this was the kind of work he wanted to do. It wasn't about the brightest classroom or the most prestigious job title. It was about giving people the tools they needed to succeed, to feel empowered and confident in their own abilities. It was about changing lives, not just through intellect, but through empathy, support, and understanding. He felt a sense of clarity wash over him. This was what he had been searching for. Jordan knew that helping others was his true calling, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. But he also understood that this was just the beginning of his journey. The road ahead would be challenging, but he was ready. He had faced obstacles before and had come out stronger on the other side. This next chapter would be no different. With his decision made, Jordan applied to colleges that had strong programs in education and community development, focusing on those that emphasized social impact and outreach. He knew he wasn't just looking for a degree, he was looking for a way to deepen his understanding of how to make a difference in the world. It was a path that felt right, one that aligned with his values and his desire to create meaningful change. The days leading up to his college acceptance letters were full of anticipation. Jordan had already begun planning how he would continue his work in the community, even while studying. His vision had expanded beyond his high school years. He wanted to create a nationwide network of tutoring programs, offering mentorship and educational resources to those who needed it most. The future, while still uncertain in many ways, had taken on a new, exciting direction. One afternoon, as he was going through his mail, a letter from a prestigious university arrived. His heart pounded as he opened the envelope, scanning the contents. Acceptance. He had been accepted into a top-tier school with a scholarship that would cover nearly all his expenses. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Jordan's face broke into a grin as he read the letter again, the words sinking in. It was real. He had done it. He had earned his place. But even more than that, he knew this wasn't just a step toward personal achievement, it was the beginning of something far greater. This was the moment when Jordan understood that his journey was not just about proving others wrong, or even proving himself right. It was about using his talents to create change in the world, to be a voice for those who didn't have one, and to empower others to achieve what they once thought was impossible. As he sat back in his chair, Jordan reflected on the path that had led him to this moment, the doubts, the fears, the challenges, and how they had all played a part in shaping him. He realized that the struggles he had faced weren't just obstacles to overcome. They were lessons that had taught him the most important thing of all, that no matter how hard life gets, there is always a way forward. And it is that way forward that Jordan would now walk, with determination and a sense of purpose, ready to face whatever came next. And so, Jordan's journey continued, not just as a student with a genius IQ, but as someone who had found his true calling. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. He had learned that success wasn't defined by the accolades he earned or the praise he received, it was about making a difference, no matter how small, in the lives of others. The future was his to shape, and Jordan was ready to embrace it. The summer following graduation was bittersweet. As the days grew longer, Jordan found himself caught between the excitement of what was to come and the quiet nostalgia of leaving behind his childhood home. He spent most of his time preparing for college, organizing his thoughts, and reflecting on everything he had accomplished thus far. Yet, there was still a lingering sense of uncertainty. The future loomed large in his mind, and the excitement of college life felt like a distant dream he wasn't entirely sure he was ready for. Jordan's acceptance to college had opened a new door, but behind it lay an entirely different world. He knew that in order to make the most of this opportunity, he would need to leave behind the comfort of familiarity and embrace the challenges that would come with his new academic and personal life. But even more than that, he had to step into a new identity. Gone were the days of being the quiet, unknown student. Now, he was stepping into a community of ambitious, driven individuals. A part of him was terrified. When Jordan finally arrived at the campus, he stood outside his dormitory building, gazing up at the towering structure in awe. The buildings, the students walking by, the energy in the air, it all felt overwhelming. It wasn't high school anymore. This was college, a place where people had a sense of purpose, where ambition was the norm, and where every student seemed to be chasing after something greater than themselves. He wasn't sure if he was ready for all of this. As he moved through the crowded campus, Jordan tried to quell the rising tide of anxiety within him. But the first day was nothing like he had imagined. The campus felt vast, impersonal, and even though it was filled with students, Jordan felt more alone than he had in years. The nervous chatter and friendly hellos from the strangers around him did little to calm his nerves. He was surrounded by people, but he still couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. It was in that moment, as he sat on a bench in the middle of the campus quad, that he saw a familiar face. Across the way, walking toward him, was a young woman with a bright, warm smile. She had a confident stride, and her energy seemed to fill the space around her. Jordan recognized her instantly. It was Maya, one of the volunteers from the after-school tutoring program he had helped organize back in high school. She had moved on to attend a different college, and Jordan had lost touch with her over the summer. But seeing her now was like a lifeline in the midst of his swirling thoughts. Maya waved as she approached, and Jordan couldn't help but smile back, feeling a wave of relief wash over him. "Jordan. I can't believe it's you," Maya said, her voice filled with excitement. "I didn't know you were here," Jordan replied, standing up and giving her a quick hug. "What are the chances?" "Clearly pretty good," she laughed, her eyes sparkling. "It's a small world, huh?" They stood there for a few moments, catching up. Maya had already made a place for herself at college, and her confidence was evident in every word she spoke. It didn't take long for Jordan to realize that, even though they were in very different places in their college journey, they shared something important, a drive to make a difference. After a few minutes, Maya invited Jordan to join her at a campus event. "It's a student club fair," she said, gesturing to a large area nearby where tables were set up with signs for different clubs and organizations. "You should come check it out. I think it'll help you get a feel for the campus. Plus, there's a club here for people who want to make a difference, social impact, leadership stuff. I know you'll love it." Jordan hesitated for a moment, still unsure of whether he should dive headfirst into anything. But Maya's enthusiasm was contagious, and he found himself nodding. "Okay, sure. Why not?" As they walked through the fair, Jordan began to relax, slowly letting go of the anxiety that had initially gripped him. Maya introduced him to various student groups, each of them passionate about causes that ranged from environmental sustainability to economic justice. Jordan felt drawn to a particular booth that focused on providing education resources to underserved communities. The group's leader, a senior named Olivia, spoke with such passion about the work they were doing that Jordan couldn't help but get excited. "I've been working on this initiative for the past year," Olivia explained. "We provide tutoring services, mentorship, and scholarship opportunities for students in low-income areas. We're always looking for people who care about helping others and want to be part of something bigger than themselves." Jordan felt a spark of recognition. This was exactly the kind of work he wanted to do. In that moment, he knew he had found something that aligned with his passions. He signed up to join the group, his heart racing with excitement. Later that evening, as he sat in his dorm room reflecting on the day, Jordan felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. This was it. This was the beginning of something new, a chance to use his skills, his knowledge, and his drive to make a real impact. It was a fresh start, and for the first time since arriving at college, Jordan felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. But as much as he was excited about the future, there was still a lingering fear in the back of his mind. He wasn't sure if he could live up to the expectations he had set for himself. What if he wasn't as capable as everyone thought? What if he failed? As he thought about it, he realized something important. It didn't matter. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but it was his journey to take. He didn't need to be perfect, he just needed to keep moving forward, step by step, doing what he could with the resources and opportunities available to him. The uncertainty was still there, but it wasn't as frightening anymore. Jordan was no longer running from the future, he was running toward it, and that made all the difference. It didn't take long for Jordan to realize that college wasn't going to be as simple as he had hoped. Despite the excitement of joining a social impact group and meeting like-minded individuals, the academic challenges were far steeper than he had anticipated. The classes were demanding, and the professors, while brilliant, seemed to expect a level of performance that left him questioning if he was truly cut out for this. Jordan found himself constantly juggling between coursework, attending meetings for the student organization, and trying to get involved in various campus events. At first, it felt like everything was manageable. He had always been good at balancing his schedule and excelling academically. But as the weeks wore on, the pressure began to mount. His grades were slipping. His project proposals were late. The student group he had joined, while inspiring, felt like another weight on his shoulders. The stress began to eat away at him. Late-night study sessions, endless to-do lists, and an overwhelming feeling of trying to keep up with everyone else's pace started to cloud his mind. It wasn't long before he found himself sitting alone in his dorm, staring at his laptop screen with no energy left to continue. "I can't keep up," he muttered under his breath, running a hand through his hair. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this after all." It was a thought that haunted him during his worst moments. What if his genius IQ, the thing that had always been his strength, wasn't enough to carry him through the rigorous demands of college life? What if he wasn't as capable as people had believed? He had always been the star student, the one who got it. But this was different. The competition here was fierce, and he was just another face in the crowd. Jordan's self-doubt intensified, and he started skipping meetings for the student group, retreating into the safety of his dorm room where he could shut out the world. The isolation he had felt when he first arrived on campus seemed to creep back in, only now it was more of a choice than a circumstance. The fear of failure had a vice-like grip on him. The turning point came during one of his routine tutoring sessions with his classmates. He had volunteered to tutor some freshman students in math and science, a subject he was naturally good at. Yet, when one of his tutees, Marcus, asked him a simple question about a particular concept, Jordan froze. For the first time, he couldn't answer. The pressure, the exhaustion, the constant feeling of inadequacy all came crashing down in that moment. "I don't get it. I thought you were supposed to be good at this," Marcus said, his voice tinged with confusion. Jordan's heart sank. The feeling of failure was suffocating. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I just don't have it today," he muttered, unable to meet his students' eyes. As he walked back to his dorm after the session, Jordan felt defeated. He had spent so much of his life being the one others looked to for answers, but now it felt like he couldn't even provide for himself, let alone anyone else. He didn't know how to turn things around. That night, as he sat staring at the wall, an unexpected message appeared on his phone. It was from Maya. "Hey, I know we haven't talked in a while, but I just wanted to check in. I know things can get tough. Don't forget to give yourself some grace. You're doing amazing things, and it's okay to have a hard day. We're all in this together. I'm here if you need to talk. Maya." Jordan stared at the message for a long moment. Something in Maya's words resonated with him. He realized he had been so focused on proving himself, both to others and to himself, that he had forgotten to take care of his mental and emotional well-being. He wasn't just a robot who could churn out perfect results. He was human. And being human meant facing struggles, setbacks, and imperfections along the way. The next day, Jordan decided to take a step back. He reached out to his professors and let them know that he had been struggling to keep up, asking for extensions and support where possible. He also decided to return to the student group that had inspired him in the first place. There was something about the work they were doing, helping underprivileged students, that reignited his passion. He didn't have to be perfect to make a difference. He just had to keep showing up. Maya's words had struck a chord, and they inspired Jordan to take a more balanced approach to his life. He would no longer try to be everything to everyone. He would prioritize what truly mattered and give himself permission to stumble along the way. And most importantly, he would be kinder to himself when things didn't go as planned. It wasn't an easy transition. It meant learning how to ask for help, how to be vulnerable, and how to give himself the space to fail. But with each passing day, Jordan found himself regaining his confidence. He leaned on his friends, his professors, and the community he was building in the social impact group. Slowly but surely, the weight that had been pressing down on him began to lighten. One afternoon, Jordan found himself at a meeting for the student organization, sitting around a table with a group of passionate individuals who were equally committed to creating change. As he shared an update on the mentorship program he was helping to develop, he was surprised to find that he felt good about it, more than good. He felt empowered. The anxiety that had plagued him for weeks was replaced by a sense of purpose, and for the first time since coming to college, Jordan didn't feel like he was failing. He felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. By the end of the semester, Jordan's grades had improved, and more importantly, he had learned how to navigate the pressures of college life. He wasn't the perfect student, and he wasn't immune to setbacks, but he had learned that failure wasn't the end. It was just another part of the process. As he walked through the campus once more, this time with a sense of confidence, Jordan realized that the challenge he had faced wasn't just about academics. It was about growth, learning to balance the expectations of others, the demands of life, and the quiet voice inside that said, "You are enough." And with that, Jordan knew that whatever came next, he would face it head-on. The first few months of college had been a whirlwind for Jordan. The ups and downs, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, and the small victories had all begun to blend into a familiar rhythm. But even with the growing sense of accomplishment and new friends, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He had found purpose in his student organization, but the academic pressure still loomed like an ever-present cloud. His genius IQ was no longer enough to solve every problem, and it had become evident that raw intelligence alone wouldn't help him survive college. He needed something more. It wasn't until mid-semester, when an unexpected invitation came, that Jordan truly understood what that something more could be. It came in the form of an email from Professor Henderson, one of his most respected teachers. Dear Jordan, I've been following your progress in class and noticed your passion for understanding the world through the lens of science and social change. I'd like to invite you to attend a guest lecture series that might interest you. It's an advanced research discussion on education disparities and the role of cognitive psychology in fostering intellectual growth. Your input would be valuable. If you're interested, please come by my office. The series starts next week. Best regards. Professor Henderson. Jordan wasn't sure what to make of the email at first. It seemed like an opportunity too good to pass up. Still, there was a part of him that hesitated. Advanced research wasn't something he had ever thought of pursuing. He had always been the student in the background, the one who excelled in tests but never pushed the boundaries of deep academic inquiry. But something about the email sparked his curiosity. He had always been interested in how cognitive science and education intersected, especially when it came to disadvantaged communities. This might be the break he had been waiting for. The next week, Jordan found himself sitting in a small, intimate lecture hall, surrounded by graduate students and faculty members. Professor Henderson stood at the front, introducing the topic with an enthusiasm that was contagious. The lecture was dense, packed with technical jargon and research findings, but to Jordan's surprise, he found himself engrossed. He had always been good at absorbing information, but this was different. It felt personal. It was like a puzzle that had been waiting to be solved, one that directly related to the work he wanted to do with underserved communities. The discussion focused on a study that examined how access to high-quality education and the psychological climate of a classroom impacted the cognitive development of students from different socioeconomic backgrounds. It was clear to Jordan that the knowledge from this lecture had the potential to influence his own approach to his work in the student organization. But more than that, it gave him the tools to think critically about systemic inequalities in education. This was the something more he had been searching for. After the lecture, Jordan stayed behind, waiting for a moment to speak with Professor Henderson. When the room cleared out, he approached the professor with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Professor Henderson," Jordan began, "I'm really fascinated by the lecture. I've been working with a group to provide educational resources for underserved students, and I think the research you discussed could help us understand how we can better support these kids. Do you think I could get involved in this kind of research?" Professor Henderson paused, looking at Jordan with a thoughtful expression. "That's a fantastic question, Jordan. We're always looking for passionate and motivated individuals who want to bridge the gap between theory and real-world application. Let's set up a time to talk more about it." Jordan felt a rush of exhilaration. He had just been invited into an academic world he had never thought possible. The path forward seemed clearer than it had in months. This was his chance to combine his academic skills with his passion for social change. Over the following weeks, Jordan worked closely with Professor Henderson and other researchers in the department. They began collaborating on a new project that aimed to develop interventions for students who were at risk of falling behind due to systemic barriers. As part of the project, Jordan helped design a series of cognitive training programs tailored to different age groups. His role in the project was to analyze the cognitive factors that influenced learning and apply that understanding to the interventions. It was a challenge unlike any he had faced before, but it was the kind of challenge that pushed him to grow in ways he hadn't anticipated. He was learning how to think critically, how to engage with complex academic research, and how to translate those ideas into something that could make a difference in the real world. It wasn't easy. The work was rigorous, and there were moments when Jordan felt out of his depth. But with each new discovery, each breakthrough in the research, Jordan felt a renewed sense of purpose. At the same time, Jordan continued to dedicate time to his student organization. He now had a clear vision of how he could help the students they served, integrating the academic knowledge he was gaining into his hands-on work. He also found that, for the first time in his life, his academic work and social impact work were no longer two separate entities, they were interconnected. The research he was doing wasn't just an abstract exercise, it had the power to shape real-world solutions. And this realization fueled his drive to succeed. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of research and meetings, Jordan found himself at the campus coffee shop, reflecting on how far he had come. He was no longer that uncertain freshman who had questioned his place at the university. He had found his niche, a space where his intellect, passion for social change, and desire to make a real impact converged. As he sipped his coffee, Maya sat down across from him, a familiar, supportive presence. She smiled as she noticed the look of deep concentration on his face. "You're lost in thought again, aren't you?" Maya teased. Jordan looked up, smiling back. "Yeah, I guess I am. I've been working on this project with Professor Henderson. It's research on how we can better support students who are struggling in school. I never thought I'd be this involved in something like this, but it feels right, you know." Maya nodded, her eyes filled with pride. "I'm really proud of you, Jordan. You've come such a long way. And this is just the beginning. You're doing amazing things." Jordan smiled, feeling a sense of gratitude toward Maya. Her unwavering belief in him had been a lifeline during some of his darkest days. "Thanks, Maya," Jordan said softly. "I couldn't have done this without people like you believing in me." She shrugged, her smile playful. "That's what friends are for, right?" As they sat together, Jordan realized that the challenges he had faced over the past few months had only made him stronger. He had doubted himself, struggled with the pressure, and wondered if he was truly cut out for this path. But now, he understood that success wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence, passion, and a willingness to grow. With his research project and his work with the student organization, Jordan was no longer just a student trying to find his way. He was a leader, an innovator, and a change-maker. And for the first time, Jordan truly believed that he could make a difference. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? It was a cold, crisp morning when Jordan found himself at a crossroads. Sitting in the campus library, surrounded by piles of notes and research papers, he stared at his laptop screen, unsure of what path to take next. His mind was racing with the possibilities, but each one seemed daunting, full of unknowns. As the semester's end approached, he had to make some decisions that would shape the direction of his college experience, and perhaps, his future. On the one hand, there was the academic world, the research, the projects, the intellectual stimulation that had recently consumed him. He had worked tirelessly alongside Professor Henderson and other graduate students, delving deeper into his project on educational disparities. It was fulfilling in ways he hadn't expected. He had discovered a passion for the intricacies of cognitive psychology and its potential to transform how students from underserved communities could learn. There was so much more to uncover, so much more to contribute. The idea of continuing this research through graduate school seemed like a natural next step. But then, there was his involvement in the student organization, the work that had initially drawn him to college in the first place. Helping underprivileged students in the community had always been a driving force for Jordan. The satisfaction of seeing a child light up when they finally understood a difficult concept, or when a struggling student gained confidence in themselves, was something he couldn't ignore. It wasn't just about the work, it was about the people he was impacting. His team had become his family, and the impact they were making felt tangible and meaningful. The problem was, he couldn't do both. Not at the level he wanted. The student organization needed him. The research project needed him. He couldn't stretch himself any thinner. As the clock ticked closer to the deadline for submitting applications for internships and research opportunities for the summer, Jordan felt paralyzed. Each option seemed like it had the potential to launch him toward greatness, but he couldn't figure out which was the right choice. Could he walk away from the student organization he had poured so much of himself into? Or was it more practical to focus entirely on the academic route and secure a research internship? Would either choice bring him closer to his ultimate goal of creating meaningful change in the world? "Are you okay?" Maya's voice broke him out of his spiral. He hadn't even noticed her walk up to him, but now, she was standing next to his desk, looking at him with a concerned expression. Jordan exhaled, rubbing his temples. "I don't know, Maya. I'm just stuck. I can't keep juggling everything, and I feel like whatever I decide is going to define the rest of my life. I just don't know what to do." Maya sat down across from him, her gaze unwavering. "You're not supposed to have all the answers right now, Jordan. I think you're just putting too much pressure on yourself." "I know. But this is important, Maya. This could be my chance to really make a difference." She leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. "You already are. Don't you see that? The work you're doing with the student organization, it's already making a difference. And what you're doing with your research. It's powerful. But you don't have to decide everything at once. It's okay to take one step at a time." Jordan let out a breath, his shoulders finally relaxing. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe he had been overthinking everything, trying to fit his entire future into a single decision. The pressure to succeed and make a lasting impact had clouded his ability to see the bigger picture. "You're right," Jordan said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I just need to take it one step at a time." Maya smiled back, her eyes filled with understanding. "Exactly. Just focus on what matters most to you now. And whatever you choose, I know you'll make it work." Jordan sat back in his chair, looking out the window. The early morning light streamed in, casting long shadows across the library's tables. As the world outside continued to move forward, he realized that there was no rush to figure everything out. The path wasn't meant to be perfectly clear, and it didn't have to be. He didn't need to have all the answers, he just needed to keep moving forward, trusting that each choice would lead him to the next one. A few days later, Jordan made his decision. He chose to continue his research with Professor Henderson, securing a summer research internship that would allow him to further develop his understanding of the intersection between cognitive psychology and education. It wasn't an easy choice to make. Walking away from the student organization felt like leaving behind a part of himself. But he knew that this was a step he needed to take, both for his own growth and for the impact he hoped to make in the future. Even as he made the decision, he felt a bittersweet pang of regret. The community he had built in the organization was a lifeline for him. But as he reflected on his journey, he realized that the lessons he had learned there, about leadership, empathy, and collaboration, would remain with him, no matter where his path led. He would carry those lessons into his research and beyond. The summer research internship was an eye-opening experience. It allowed Jordan to dive deeper into the work he was passionate about, developing a greater understanding of how cognitive psychology could be used to address the challenges students faced in underfunded schools. He spent countless hours poring over data, analyzing patterns, and discussing theories with Professor Henderson. Each day, his passion for the subject grew, and his desire to create tangible solutions for educational inequities became even more urgent. But throughout it all, Jordan never forgot the students and the community he had left behind. He stayed in touch with his peers in the student organization, providing guidance and support whenever he could. His decision to focus on his research didn't mean he had abandoned his commitment to making a difference, it meant he was positioning himself to create lasting change from a new angle. By the end of the summer, Jordan had learned something crucial: success wasn't about choosing between paths, it was about finding a way to integrate all the things that mattered to him. He wasn't just a researcher. He wasn't just a volunteer. He was someone who could move between these worlds, taking the knowledge from one and applying it to the other. As he returned to campus for the start of his sophomore year, Jordan walked through the quad with a newfound clarity. He had made it through a period of uncertainty, and now he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he had the strength to navigate them. The fall semester brought with it a renewed sense of purpose. Jordan walked into his second year of college with a clearer vision of his future. His research with Professor Henderson had deepened his understanding of how cognitive science could shape educational practices, especially in underserved communities. It was something that ignited his passion like never before. But even as his academic life flourished, the cracks in his personal life began to show. The first signs of stress were subtle, small changes in his behavior that he initially dismissed. He spent more and more time in the library, poring over research papers late into the night. He canceled plans with friends, explaining that he had too much to do. The study group he had formed for his sociology class, once a place of camaraderie and teamwork, became just another obligation to check off his list. Maya noticed it before anyone else. As his close friend and confidant, she saw the toll that his commitments were taking on him. It wasn't just that he was overworked, it was that the pressure was starting to erode his confidence. "Jordan, you need to take a break," she said one evening, watching him run his hands through his hair in frustration after hours of studying. They were sitting in the common area of the student center, a place where they had often relaxed and caught up after long days of classes. But tonight, the atmosphere was different. Jordan's usual warmth was replaced with a distracted, exhausted energy. "I don't have time for a break, Maya," Jordan replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "I'm too close to finishing the data analysis for the research project. I have to get this done. And then there's the presentation for the student organization, another fundraiser coming up. And my own classes. I'm just trying to keep up with everything." Maya crossed her arms, leaning forward. "But Jordan, you're pushing yourself too hard. You can't do it all. You need to stop pretending that you can. You're not a machine." Jordan sighed, looking down at the papers scattered in front of him. Maya's words were like a slap in the face, but in the best possible way. She was right. He had been pushing himself too hard, and he was too proud to admit it. In his quest to succeed and prove that he was more than just the genius label, he had lost sight of the most important thing, his well-being. I don't know what's happening to me, Maya. I feel like I'm losing control. Everything's piling up, and I'm failing at keeping it together. Maya softened, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. It's okay to feel overwhelmed, Jordan. We all do sometimes. But you don't have to go through it alone. You have me, and you have your team. Let us help you. Jordan didn't respond right away. He was too proud to admit how much he needed help, and yet, deep down, he knew Maya was right. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about learning how to balance everything and finding support when needed. I'll try, he said, his voice quiet. But I don't know how to slow down. Everything feels like it's moving so fast. Slow down, Maya repeated. Take a breath. You're going to burn yourself out if you keep going at this pace. One step at a time, Jordan. The next few days were a whirlwind. Jordan made an effort to recalibrate, though it was harder than he imagined. He met with Professor Henderson and explained his struggles. To his surprise, the professor wasn't disappointed in him. Instead, Henderson expressed concern for Jordan's well-being and offered him the opportunity to step back a bit from the research to focus on regaining his balance. I understand the pressure, Jordan, Professor Henderson said, his voice kind but firm. But don't forget that taking care of yourself is just as important as the work. The research will still be there when you're ready. I want you to feel empowered to take a step back when you need it. It was an incredibly freeing moment for Jordan. He had spent so long trying to prove that he could handle everything that he had forgotten the importance of listening to his body and mind. With the professor's encouragement, Jordan took a few days to step away from the research project to focus on what really mattered, reconnecting with his team, spending time with his friends, and recalibrating his goals for the semester. During this break, he realized something that shifted his entire perspective. It wasn't enough to just succeed academically, he had to take care of himself along the way. He could be the best researcher, the best student, and the best leader, but none of that mattered if he didn't learn how to find joy in the process, rather than just focusing on the outcome. Maya was right. Slowing down wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a strategy for sustainability. When Jordan returned to his responsibilities, he did so with a new mindset. He restructured his schedule, allowing himself time for breaks, relaxation, and self-care. The pressure didn't go away completely, he still had to present his research findings to the class and organize the upcoming student organization fundraiser, but he was no longer consumed by it. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, he now approached his work with a sense of calm and purpose. He started to delegate tasks within his team, leaning on his friends and peers for support. The student organization had always been a group effort, and now, more than ever, Jordan saw the importance of collaboration. His team understood the demands they all faced, and they rallied around him, helping him with the tasks that had been piling up. The fundraiser for the organization was a success, raising more money than they had ever hoped for. The research presentation, which he had once dreaded, went smoothly, and his classmates and professors were impressed with his insights. But the true success came when Jordan realized that he didn't have to do everything alone. He didn't have to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. There was strength in asking for help and in taking the time to recharge. As the semester continued, Jordan found himself in a healthier, more balanced place. He learned that success wasn't about being perfect, it was about knowing when to step back and recalibrate, and having the humility to accept support when needed. His personal growth wasn't just about academic achievements, it was about learning how to be kind to himself in the face of pressure. And with that, Jordan knew that the path ahead, however uncertain it might seem, was one he could walk with strength, purpose, and the support of those who believed in him. As the months passed, Jordan continued to grow and adjust to the demands of college life. He had found a balance between his academic pursuits, his leadership in the student organization, and his personal well-being. The research project with Professor Henderson was progressing smoothly, and his involvement with the community was making an impact. Life seemed to be falling into place, or so he thought. It all came crashing down one chilly afternoon in early November. Jordan had been working late in the library, reviewing his research for an upcoming paper, when he received an email notification. The subject line was simple, but the message within it was anything but. Urgent, issue with research data, immediate attention required. Jordan's stomach sank as he opened the email. It was from Professor Henderson, who had discovered a significant problem with the data Jordan had been collecting for months. There were discrepancies in the dataset that couldn't be explained. What had seemed like solid, groundbreaking research was now called into question. Jordan's mind raced. How could this be happening? He had checked the data countless times. He had been meticulous in his analysis. What went wrong? He immediately replied to the email, requesting a meeting with Professor Henderson. A few hours later, he found himself sitting across from his mentor in the professor's office, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. I've gone over the data multiple times, Jordan, Professor Henderson said, his voice measured. There are inconsistencies here that we can't ignore. At this point, we have to assume the analysis you've been conducting is compromised. Jordan's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just a minor error, it was a major setback. His entire project, the one that had become his passion, the one that had made him feel like he was on the cusp of something meaningful, was suddenly in jeopardy. I don't understand, Jordan said, his voice strained. I triple-checked everything. How could this have happened? Professor Henderson nodded, his expression sympathetic. It's possible that in the process of analyzing the data, there was a misstep somewhere. It could be a simple mistake, or it could be a more complicated issue. Either way, it's going to take time to fix. Jordan felt a lump form in his throat. The thought of starting over, of losing the progress he had made, was devastating. This was the project that had pushed him to his limits, the one that had brought him to the edge of discovering something that could change the way education was approached in underserved communities. And now it was all unraveling. The weight of the failure settled heavily on his shoulders as he left Professor Henderson's office. As he walked through the quiet halls of the university, his thoughts spiraled. Was this a sign that he wasn't cut out for this kind of work? Maybe he wasn't as brilliant as everyone had thought. Maybe he wasn't meant to make a difference after all. When Jordan returned to his dorm, Maya was waiting for him, sensing something was wrong the moment he walked in. Hey, what happened? She asked, her eyes full of concern. Jordan collapsed onto his bed, his body feeling like it was made of lead. The research, it's ruined. The data's all wrong. Everything I've been working on is for nothing. Maya sat beside him, her voice soft but determined. I know you're upset, but this isn't the end of the world. You'll fix it. You've always been able to fix things. I don't know, Maya, Jordan said, his voice barely above a whisper. I've been working so hard. I don't even know where to start. What if I can't fix it? Maya placed a hand on his shoulder. You won't know unless you try. This isn't about whether or not you're smart enough. It's about how you handle setbacks. You've faced challenges before, and you'll get through this one too. Jordan looked at her, his mind still swirling with self-doubt. But what if it's too much? What if I just can't do it? Maya smiled gently, her eyes unwavering. You don't know that yet. All you can do is take the next step. You've come so far. Don't let this one thing define you. Her words lingered in his mind long after she left. She was right. This wasn't the end. It was just a setback. But even as the thought tried to take root in his mind, the fear and doubt remained. Could he really fix this? Was he capable of salvaging everything he had worked for? Over the next few weeks, Jordan immersed himself in the task of retracing his steps. He combed through the data, looking for any signs of what went wrong. There were moments when he wanted to give up, when the pressure of starting over seemed too much to bear. But he kept pushing forward, knowing that giving up was not an option. Not this time. In the process, Jordan discovered several small errors that had snowballed into the larger problem. The more he worked, the clearer the solution became. The process wasn't quick, nor was it easy, but Jordan's determination carried him through. Every time he thought about walking away, Maya's voice echoed in his mind, "Don't let this define you." The breakthrough came one Friday afternoon. After hours of revising and recalculating, Jordan finally fixed the discrepancies in the data. The project was back on track, and the analysis was as solid as it had been before. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was something he could be proud of. He sat back in his chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. It was over. The setback had been averted, but it had also taught him something important. The path to success was rarely smooth. There would always be obstacles, always be moments of doubt and failure. But it was in those moments of struggle that growth occurred. Jordan picked up his phone and texted Maya, "I did it. The data's fixed. It's not perfect, but it's real." A few seconds later, Maya's response came through, "I knew you could do it. Proud of you, Jordan." Jordan smiled, the weight lifting off his shoulders. He had faced a significant setback, and he had overcome it. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, but he also knew that he had the strength to face them. By the time winter break arrived, Jordan had made incredible strides not only in his academic work but also in how he viewed challenges. His successful recovery from the research setback had reignited a fire within him, one that burned brighter and more determined than ever before. Yet, despite his academic and personal growth, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that something important was missing. He had put so much energy into proving his worth academically and professionally that he had neglected the most essential part of his journey, his own happiness. The moment of realization came one evening as he sat alone in the university's student lounge, going over his notes for the final presentation of his research. The familiar buzz of students studying, chatting, and laughing around him seemed distant, as though he was observing life from a window, rather than participating in it. He glanced at his phone, seeing a message from Maya, "Hey, wanna grab dinner tonight? You've been working non-stop and could probably use a break." Jordan hesitated for a moment. Maya was right. He had been cooped up in his room or the library for weeks, dedicating every waking hour to his work. The idea of taking a break was foreign to him. But as he stared at the message, he realized how much he missed the simple moments, laughing with friends, talking about things other than research, reconnecting with the world around him. "Yes, let's do it," he replied, putting his notes aside and grabbing his jacket. There was no reason to put off something so simple yet so important. That night, as they sat down to eat at their favorite diner, Maya noticed the change in Jordan immediately. He seemed more relaxed, more present. The weight that had been hanging over him for months seemed to have lifted, even if just for a few hours. "You look like you actually know how to have fun again," Maya teased, taking a sip of her water. Jordan chuckled, shaking his head. "I guess I needed a reminder that there's more to life than just school. I've been so caught up in trying to prove myself that I forgot to live." Maya smiled knowingly. "I've been trying to get you to take a break for weeks. It's like you've been living in a pressure cooker, and now you've finally let the steam out." Jordan nodded, his fingers tracing the edge of his cup. "I didn't realize how much I was pushing myself until I hit that wall. I thought I could handle it all, being the perfect student, the perfect leader, the perfect everything. But it was never about being perfect. It's about being human, learning from the mistakes, and letting myself enjoy the journey." Maya leaned forward, her expression softening. "You're still the same Jordan. You've just learned how to balance it all better. That's growth." Jordan smiled, feeling the truth in her words. He had been so focused on his academic goals, trying to prove to others, and to himself, that he was capable of greatness, that he had almost forgotten what truly mattered, being present, enjoying the people around him, and savoring the moments of joy that made life worth living. The next morning, Jordan woke up with a sense of clarity he hadn't felt in a long time. He had a presentation to prepare for and a final exam to study for, but it didn't feel like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. The truth was, Jordan had always been good at his studies. He didn't need to overwork himself or sacrifice his personal life to prove that. What mattered more was how he approached the future, how he balanced ambition with self-care, and how he cultivated relationships with those who supported him. For the first time in a long while, Jordan felt ready to face the challenges ahead, not with the burden of perfection but with the strength of knowing he could rise above anything life threw at him. The day of the presentation arrived, and Jordan stood in front of the class, his hands steady and his mind clear. His data was solid. His analysis was compelling. But what was more important than all of that was the confidence with which he spoke. He had nothing to prove. He had already proven to himself that he was capable of achieving greatness, no matter the setbacks. As he spoke, he saw his classmates listening intently, impressed not only by the content but also by the authenticity in his voice. For the first time in his academic career, Jordan didn't feel the need to impress anyone. He simply shared his findings and his passion for the subject. The feeling was liberating. When he finished, there was a brief moment of silence, followed by applause. Professor Henderson was the first to stand, giving Jordan an approving nod. "That was excellent work, Jordan. I'm proud of how you've grown, both as a student and as a person. You've shown not only your intellectual capabilities but also your resilience. Well done." Jordan couldn't help but smile. This was the moment he had been waiting for, not for the applause or the recognition, but for the internal peace that came with knowing he had given his best. And that was enough. As winter break came to an end, Jordan's life had transformed. He had learned a valuable lesson in resilience and balance, one that had changed not only his academic trajectory but his personal life as well. He had found the strength to face setbacks, not with fear, but with confidence. And most importantly, he had learned to live in the moment, to enjoy the journey rather than obsess over the destination. Jordan knew there would be more obstacles ahead, there always were, but he now had the tools to navigate them with grace. The future was no longer a pressure-filled race to the finish line. It was a path that he would walk with determination, but also with joy, purpose, and the support of the people who mattered most. Spring arrived on campus, and with it, a new set of challenges for Jordan. He had overcome the difficulties of his research project and learned valuable lessons about balance and resilience. But now, he was facing an entirely different kind of obstacle, a challenge that would test his leadership skills and force him to confront deep-seated fears about his future. It all began when the president of the student organization he had been working with approached him one afternoon in the library. Jordan had just finished a meeting with his academic advisor and was about to head to the gym when he saw Sarah walking toward him. She looked more serious than usual, her expression tight with concern. "Hey, Jordan," she greeted him with a forced smile, her voice carrying an edge he didn't quite recognize. "Hey, Sarah. What's going on?" Jordan asked, setting his books down. He could tell something was off. Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I need to talk to you about something important. It's about the upcoming Student Leadership Conference." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "What's going on with the conference? I thought we were all set for the presentation next month." "That's the problem," Sarah said, her voice dropping a little. "Our team is struggling. We don't have enough people signed up, and the ones who did sign up aren't following through. And worse, I've been thinking about stepping down as president. I just don't think I can handle it anymore." Jordan's heart sank. Sarah had been the one to recruit him into the organization. She had always been the driving force behind its success. The thought of her stepping down left him with a sense of unease. Sarah, are you serious? I mean, I know it's been a lot, but you're the one who keeps us all together. Without you, I don't know if we could pull this off." She sighed deeply, running a hand through her hair. I don't know if I can keep doing it. It's not just the conference, Jordan. The stress, the pressure, everything. I don't feel like I'm cut out for it anymore. And I don't want to drag everyone down with me. Jordan watched her, knowing that this was more than just about the conference. Sarah was at a breaking point, and he knew exactly what that felt like. The weight of responsibility, the fear of letting others down, it was something he had experienced himself, especially during his research setbacks. But it was also an opportunity. An opportunity for him to step up, to show the leadership skills he had been developing over the past year. Sarah, he began, choosing his words carefully, I get it. I really do. But you're not alone in this. We're all in this together. If you're feeling overwhelmed, then let's tackle this as a team. I'm not going to let you carry all the weight. Let me help. Let's get the team back on track, and we'll figure out a way to make this conference work. I believe in you, and I believe in all of us. Sarah looked at him, her eyes softening. I don't know if I can do it, Jordan. I've always been the one in control, and now it feels like I'm losing everything. You don't have to be in control all the time, Jordan said, his voice gentle but firm. It's okay to lean on others. It's okay to ask for help. That's what leadership is, it's about bringing people together, not about doing everything yourself. And you've done that better than anyone I know. We've got your back. For the first time in weeks, Sarah looked a little relieved. Okay, she said quietly, let's try. Let's get this conference done. Together. That evening, Jordan spent hours brainstorming ideas with Sarah. They sat at a small table in the campus coffee shop, surrounded by empty mugs and stacks of paper. The mood was lighter than it had been all day. Together, they devised a plan to re-energize the team, to create excitement about the conference, and to address the lack of follow-through. They decided to hold a team meeting the next day to gather everyone, reassess their goals, and divide up responsibilities more evenly. As the night wore on, Jordan couldn't help but feel a growing sense of purpose. This wasn't just about academic achievements anymore. This was about leadership in the real world. He had learned how to overcome setbacks, how to push past the moments when he thought he couldn't go any further. But now, he was learning how to lead others through their own struggles, to help them see the bigger picture, and to inspire them to take action. The next day, Jordan was in full-on leadership mode. He helped Sarah organize the meeting, making sure that everyone understood the importance of the conference and how their contributions would make a difference. Jordan didn't shy away from challenging anyone who seemed disengaged, pushing them to give their best effort. To his surprise, it wasn't as difficult as he had anticipated. The team responded well to his energy and vision. They shared ideas, laughed, and worked together to come up with a solid plan. As the meeting came to an end, Jordan saw the transformation in the group. People were more motivated than they had been in months. There was a sense of unity, of purpose, that had been missing for so long. As the weeks went by, Jordan's leadership began to shine. He worked closely with Sarah, guiding the team through every step of the planning process. The conference, which had seemed doomed to fail just a few weeks earlier, was now on track for success. The team was more engaged, and the energy was contagious. They were no longer just preparing for an event, they were preparing for an experience that would leave an impact on everyone who attended. Jordan realized that the challenge ahead wasn't just about the conference or the student organization. It was about his own growth as a leader and a person. This was his opportunity to practice what he had learned, that setbacks weren't the end of the road, but rather a chance to rise above and become stronger. And as he looked around at the people he was helping to lead, Jordan knew that he was on the right path. But there was still more to learn. More challenges awaited, more moments of doubt, but Jordan was ready for them. Because now he knew that leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about being real, being present, and being willing to face the obstacles head-on. Spring break arrived, and for the first time in a long while, Jordan felt like he could breathe. The leadership conference was a resounding success, thanks in large part to the renewed energy of the team he had helped to rally. It was a reminder that the work he put into helping others was just as important as his personal achievements. However, as he reflected on this, Jordan knew that there were still bigger challenges on the horizon. His journey was far from over. The day after the conference ended, Jordan took a break from his responsibilities. He had a few days to himself, and he decided to take advantage of them by getting out of town for a bit. He needed perspective, a change of scenery, something that would help him step back from everything and reorient himself. He called Maya. "Hey, Maya, what are you up to this weekend?" Jordan asked, already knowing she'd be interested in his idea. Maya's voice came through excitedly. "Not much. What's up?" "I'm thinking of taking a short trip, just a weekend getaway. Maybe a hike or something. I need a change of pace. You in?" Without hesitation, Maya replied, "Absolutely. A little fresh air sounds perfect right now. Where do you want to go?" Jordan thought for a moment. "I've been hearing about this small cabin near the mountains. It's a couple of hours outside the city. I'm thinking it could be the perfect place to disconnect for a bit." Maya agreed, and the two made plans to leave the following afternoon. That weekend would give Jordan the chance to unwind, to get out of his academic and leadership responsibilities, and to reset. But it would also provide a unique opportunity to explore what he truly wanted from the future. The drive to the cabin was filled with laughter, stories, and conversation. Maya and Jordan were able to relax and talk freely without the pressure of deadlines, research, or the constant buzz of campus life. The beauty of the mountains, the scent of fresh pine in the air, and the peacefulness of the woods seemed to clear Jordan's mind in a way nothing else had. As they arrived at the cabin, Jordan felt an overwhelming sense of calm. He stepped out of the car and breathed in deeply, appreciating the simplicity of the moment. The cabin was tucked away in a secluded spot, surrounded by towering trees and a small creek running nearby. It was the perfect escape. That evening, they sat on the porch, wrapped in blankets with mugs of hot cocoa in hand. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting a warm glow over the landscape. "This place is amazing," Maya said, gazing out at the scenery. "It's like we've stepped out of time." Jordan nodded, his gaze focused on the horizon. "Yeah, it's exactly what I needed. It's like everything I've been working on just fades away here. I can finally think clearly." Maya smiled softly. "Sometimes, it takes getting away from everything to realize what's really important. Maybe that's what you've been missing, just space to breathe, to figure out where you want to go next. You've been juggling so much lately. Have you even had time to think about the future, outside of school and leadership?" Jordan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I've been so caught up in trying to prove myself, trying to meet all these expectations. I didn't even think about what I want for the future, just what's expected of me." Maya looked at him with understanding. "You've been carrying a lot on your shoulders. But have you ever thought about taking a step back and deciding for yourself? Maybe it's time to define success on your own terms, not based on what others think." Jordan was silent for a long moment, staring at the stars now beginning to fill the night sky. What Maya said struck a chord with him. He had always measured success by how well he performed academically, how many people he could lead, how high he could climb. But was that truly what he wanted? Was it enough? For the first time in a long time, Jordan realized that the pressure to be everything for everyone else had blinded him to his own desires. Maybe it was time to ask himself, what did he want for his future? The next day, Jordan and Maya took a hike through the woods. The crisp air and quiet of the forest provided the perfect environment for deep thought. As they walked, Jordan felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in months. They made their way to the top of a small hill, where the view of the valley stretched out before them. The vastness of the world around him made everything else seem small in comparison. As they rested at the top, Maya turned to Jordan. "You know, you've already done so much. You're a leader, a top student. You're doing all the right things. But don't forget that there's no rule saying you have to do it all at once. It's okay to take your time, to figure things out, and to decide what matters to you. Jordan took a deep breath, looking out at the horizon. For the first time in a while, he felt a sense of clarity. The future wasn't some destination he had to rush toward. It was a path he could choose for himself, with the freedom to redefine success as he saw fit. Whether that meant pursuing a PhD, starting a business, or doing something completely unexpected, he had the power to decide. Maybe it's time to stop trying to live up to others' expectations, Jordan said thoughtfully. I've been so focused on meeting standards that I forgot about what I really want. Maybe it's time to let go of that fear of failure and trust that I can create my own future. Maya smiled. Exactly. The world is full of possibilities, Jordan. You've already proven that you can rise above anything. But now, you get to choose what you want to rise toward. By the time they returned to campus, Jordan felt like a different person. The time spent away from his usual routine had given him the space to think, to reflect, and to reframe his perspective on success. He had learned that while external achievements were valuable, the most important thing was finding fulfillment in his journey. Back on campus, Jordan faced the challenges ahead with renewed energy and a clearer sense of purpose. He was ready to pursue whatever path felt right to him, not because it was expected, but because it aligned with his true desires. The future was no longer a set of obligations, it was a world of opportunity waiting to be explored. And as he took the next steps on his journey, Jordan knew that this was only the beginning. The horizon was wide, and he was finally ready to choose his direction. The weeks following Jordan's weekend retreat were a time of transformation. He returned to campus with a new outlook, one that embraced the uncertainty of the future rather than fearing it. The clarity he had gained at the cabin, the idea of pursuing his own path, had opened his mind to the endless possibilities ahead. But even with that newfound sense of peace, the world around him remained as fast-paced and demanding as ever. Jordan's friends noticed the change in him almost immediately. He was calmer, more grounded, but also more focused. He no longer seemed to be rushing from one commitment to another, trying to prove something to the world. Instead, he was making more deliberate choices about what he invested his energy in. He felt lighter, like he had finally let go of the burden of living up to other people's expectations. But as much as he had grown, there was still one major question lingering in the back of his mind: what would he do after graduation? He had excelled in his studies and risen to leadership positions, but now, faced with the end of his academic journey, Jordan was uncertain about the next step. The world outside the university was both exciting and terrifying, and for the first time, he didn't have all the answers. It was during a casual conversation with Professor Harper that the question of his future resurfaced in a way Jordan had not anticipated. "You're graduating soon, right, Jordan?" Professor Harper asked one afternoon after class, his voice thoughtful as he shuffled papers on his desk. "You've done some remarkable work here, and I imagine you've got plenty of opportunities ahead of you." Jordan nodded, though his mind wasn't entirely on the conversation. He had been looking forward to graduation for months, but now that it was approaching, a sense of unease had started to creep in. He wasn't sure if he was ready to face what came next. "I guess I am," Jordan replied, his voice uncertain. "I've been thinking a lot about my future, but it's hard to know what the right choice is." Professor Harper studied him for a moment, his expression softening with understanding. "You know, Jordan, one thing I've learned in my own career is that there's no one right path. Success doesn't look the same for everyone. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that there's a single, correct, way to do things, but the truth is, the best path is the one that feels right to you." Jordan's eyes met his professor's, sensing the weight of his words. "But how do you know which path is the right one? What if I make the wrong choice?" Professor Harper smiled, a warm, knowing smile that seemed to radiate wisdom. "The truth is, Jordan, there are no wrong choices, just different experiences. You might take one route, only to find that it leads you somewhere unexpected. Or you might take another and find that it's not what you thought it would be. The key is not to fear the unknown. Embrace it. Because in those unknown places, you'll discover what you're truly capable of. Jordan's heart began to race. Was he ready to take that leap of faith into the unknown? To embrace a future he couldn't predict or control? It was easier said than done, and the fear of failure, of disappointing himself and others, still lingered. Professor Harper's words echoed in his mind as he left the classroom. Embrace the unknown. What did that even mean? It was easy to say, but harder to live out. Jordan had spent so much of his life following a set plan: excel in school, gain leadership experience, impress people along the way. But now that the end of his college journey was in sight, he realized he wasn't sure what his plan for the future looked like anymore. It was terrifying. That evening, Jordan sat alone in his dorm room, staring out the window as the campus buzzed around him. The world seemed to be moving so quickly, and for the first time, he wasn't sure where he fit into it all. His friends were making plans for internships, graduate programs, and jobs. They had the next step of their lives all figured out. But Jordan? He was still grappling with the unknown. Maya called him later that night, and Jordan answered, her familiar voice providing a sense of comfort amidst the uncertainty. "How's it going?" she asked, sensing that something was off in his tone. Jordan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know, Maya. I feel like I should have it all figured out by now, but I don't. The closer graduation gets, the more I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something, but I don't know what's waiting for me. It's scary." Maya paused, her voice soft. "Jordan, it's okay to not have everything figured out. It's actually really normal to feel uncertain about what comes next. Nobody has it all planned out, trust me, I don't either. But that's part of the adventure, right? You get to choose your own path, even if it's not the one you expected." Jordan leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. "I've spent so much time trying to follow the steps everyone else has taken. Get good grades, lead organizations, get into a top grad program, but what if that's not what I really want? What if I'm chasing something that's not even me? You're figuring it out, Jordan. You don't have to have all the answers now. What's important is that you trust yourself and take that next step, even if it's scary. You've already done so much, now it's just about taking the next leap." Her words felt like a lifeline, pulling him out of the depths of his doubts. Maya was right. He didn't need to have it all figured out. The future wasn't a destination, it was a journey. And like any journey, it was full of twists, turns, and surprises. The key wasn't to have everything mapped out in advance but to be open to the experience of discovery. The next few days were a whirlwind of reflection. Jordan spent time talking with professors, mentors, and friends, all of whom shared their own experiences of navigating the uncertainty after college. Each conversation brought him a little closer to understanding that it wasn't the certainty of the future that mattered, but the confidence in his ability to handle whatever came his way. One afternoon, as he sat with Maya in their favorite coffee shop, Jordan made a decision. "You're right, Maya," he said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "I don't have all the answers, and I'm not going to pretend I do. But I'm ready to take that leap into the unknown. I don't know what it looks like yet, but I trust that I'll figure it out as I go." Maya smiled, her eyes sparkling with pride. "That's the spirit, Jordan. You've got this. The future is yours to create." Jordan's leap into the unknown didn't come with a map or a clear destination. It was a choice to embrace uncertainty, to trust in his ability to adapt and grow. In doing so, he took the first step toward the future he would build for himself, one where success wasn't defined by others but by the life he created on his own terms. As he stood on the precipice of graduation, Jordan knew that the world was full of endless possibilities, and that he was ready to take the leap. As graduation day loomed closer, the weight of the decisions ahead continued to press down on Jordan. But with each passing day, he felt more at ease with the idea of stepping into the unknown. The conversations with Maya, Professor Harper, and his own reflections had helped him realize that the journey ahead didn't need to be planned down to the smallest detail. The first step, he knew, was simply about trusting himself. Still, the fear lingered. That morning, as Jordan sat at his desk, surrounded by graduation announcements and job offers, the uncertainty returned in full force. He had options: an internship with a prestigious tech company, a graduate program that promised to open doors, and even an offer to work as a consultant at a well-known firm. On paper, it seemed like every choice would set him on a successful path. Yet none of them felt like the right fit. Jordan ran his hand over his face, his mind racing. He had spent the past 4 years preparing for this moment, working hard, keeping his eye on the prize. But now that he was at the threshold, the reality was far less clear than he had imagined. Maybe I should just go for the internship. It's safe. It's a clear path. I'd be stupid to turn that down, he muttered to himself, glancing at the offer in front of him. But then he remembered the conversations, the way he had felt standing on top of that hill during the hike with Maya. He had learned to embrace the unknown. This was his chance to take the kind of leap that could change everything. But was he really ready to take that risk? That afternoon, Jordan met up with Maya at their favorite spot on campus, the small park by the lake. The trees were starting to bloom, and the warm spring air felt refreshing after the stress of the past few weeks. As always, Maya was full of energy, ready to offer her wisdom. "So, how are things going?" Maya asked as they sat down on the bench, her eyes bright with curiosity. Jordan sighed, looking out over the water. "I don't know, Maya. I've been offered a lot of things, internships, grad programs, you name it. And they're all great opportunities, but none of them feel right. I can't shake the feeling that I'm just following a set path that's already been laid out for me." Maya nodded, understanding immediately. "You've been following a script for so long, Jordan. It's not easy to break out of it. But you've got to trust that the path you choose now can be one that you write for yourself, not one that someone else wrote for you." Jordan glanced at her, his eyes filled with both gratitude and uncertainty. "But what if I mess up? What if I end up failing?" Maya smiled gently, her voice steady. "You're not going to fail, Jordan. You might stumble, but that's part of the journey. The only real failure is not trying at all. You've been through so much already, and you've come out stronger. Whatever happens next will just be another chapter in your story. But you have to take the leap." Jordan sat in silence, the weight of her words settling deep within him. He realized something important in that moment: the fear he felt wasn't really about failure. It was about commitment. The fear of choosing a path that could lead him to a future that was uncertain, one that was uncharted. But wasn't that the point? To break free from the confines of expectations and embrace a future that was his to shape. That evening, Jordan sat at his desk again, staring at the offers laid out before him. His thoughts were clear now. The decision wasn't about playing it safe or taking the most prestigious opportunity. It was about finding something that would give him the space to grow, to explore, and to truly live out his potential. He picked up the phone and dialed Maya's number. "Maya," he said when she picked up, his voice steady but filled with purpose. "I think I've made my decision. I'm going to turn down all the offers I've gotten. I'm going to take some time off, travel, and figure out what I really want to do. I don't know what comes next, but I know that I need to step away from the plans I've been following and do something on my own terms." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line, and then Maya's voice came through, warm and encouraging. "Jordan, I'm so proud of you. You're making the right choice. The future isn't about getting to a destination, it's about the journey. And this is just the beginning of yours." The days following that decision were filled with a sense of liberation Jordan hadn't expected. He was no longer tied to a set plan or a timeline dictated by others. He had given himself permission to explore, to find his own way, and to live life on his terms. Graduation day arrived with a mixture of excitement and relief. As Jordan stood on the stage, receiving his diploma, he couldn't help but think about how far he had come. Just a few months ago, he had been uncertain, unsure of his place in the world. But now, as he walked across that stage, he felt a sense of pride in how much he had grown. He had learned to embrace the unknown, to trust himself, and to take risks, even when it scared him. As he looked out into the crowd, his gaze landed on his parents, who beamed with pride, and Maya, who stood among the sea of students, clapping enthusiastically. In that moment, Jordan realized something: this was just the beginning. The real journey was ahead of him, and he was ready to take it. That evening, as he sat on the porch of his apartment, Jordan reflected on his journey. He was filled with excitement about the future, but more than that, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. The fear, the uncertainty, and the doubts, he had faced them all. But now, with the future wide open before him, Jordan knew that he was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. Whatever came next, he was ready to take that first step. With a smile, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. The unknown no longer seemed so intimidating. It felt like freedom. And for the first time in a long time, Jordan knew that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The leap had been taken. The journey had begun. As the weeks after graduation unfolded, Jordan found himself in a state of perpetual motion. He hadn't signed a contract for an internship or joined a graduate program. Instead, he had made the bold choice to travel. It was something he had always dreamed of but never truly allowed himself to do. Now, with no strict obligations or deadlines hanging over him, the world was wide open. And yet, as thrilling as it all was, Jordan couldn't shake the feeling that he was embarking on something much bigger than just a journey across the globe. He was, in many ways, embarking on a journey within. His first stop was a small town in Northern California, nestled among the towering redwoods. It was a far cry from the bustling campus of his university, and the peaceful isolation of the place gave him the time and space to reflect. As he walked among the ancient trees, the gravity of his decision to step away from everything he had been taught to pursue weighed on him. But it wasn't an overwhelming sense of doubt that gnawed at him now. It was more of a curiosity, a desire to understand who he truly was when the external pressures of life no longer defined him. It wasn't long before Jordan started meeting people who shared similar experiences. Travelers who, like him, were searching for something they couldn't quite put into words. He met Claire, a photographer from the Midwest, who had sold everything she owned to explore the world. And there was Aidan, a former lawyer who had given up his prestigious career to live in a van and drive across the country. Each of them had their own story, their own reason for abandoning the conventional path. But the one thing they all shared was a thirst for meaning, for something deeper than the superficial success the world had taught them to chase. One evening, while sitting by a campfire with Claire and Aidan, Jordan found himself opening up in a way he hadn't before. The fire crackled as the night air grew colder, and the flickering flames cast long shadows across the faces of the small group. "You know," Jordan began, breaking the comfortable silence, "I've been thinking a lot about this whole idea of success. It's funny, all through college, I worked so hard to get to a place where I could prove to everyone that I was successful. But now that I'm here, I'm not sure what success really means." Claire, who had been roasting marshmallows, glanced up, her eyes thoughtful. "I think we're all searching for that. Success is one of those things that's different for everyone. But maybe it's not about the title or the salary or the recognition. Maybe it's about how we feel when we're doing what we're meant to do. You know, when we're aligned with something bigger than just the next step in life." Jordan nodded slowly, absorbing her words. "Yeah, that makes sense. But how do you even know when you're aligned with something bigger? How do you know what you're meant to do?" Aidan, who had been quietly watching the flames, leaned forward. "You don't always know right away," he said. I spent years in a job that was supposed to make me happy, great salary, prestigious firm, but I was miserable. And then one day, I just realized it wasn't the work itself that was the problem. It was that I wasn't being true to myself. I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do, not what I was actually passionate about. Jordan felt a shift inside him, like something had clicked. He had been so focused on the external markers of success, degrees, accolades, career paths, that he had never really asked himself what truly made him happy. What made him feel alive? I don't want to keep chasing something just because it looks good on paper, Jordan said, his voice soft but resolute. I want to find something that feels right. Something that makes me feel fulfilled. In the weeks that followed, Jordan's travels took him from one breathtaking location to the next. Each place he visited seemed to bring him closer to the answers he had been searching for. In a small village in Peru, he helped build a school for underprivileged children. In the streets of Tokyo, he connected with artists and musicians who were making a living doing what they loved. Everywhere he went, he found himself surrounded by people who had chosen to follow their own passions, even if it meant stepping away from the traditional definitions of success. It was in these experiences that Jordan began to discover what true fulfillment looked like. It wasn't about the job title or the paycheck, it was about finding purpose in the work he did, the relationships he built, and the impact he had on others. He realized that the greatest success was not about impressing others with what he could achieve, but about being honest with himself and following his own path, even if it was unconventional. One afternoon, while hiking up a mountain in New Zealand, Jordan took a moment to pause at the summit. The view before him was stunning, endless fields stretching out below, the sun casting long shadows over the landscape. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. He wasn't thinking about his next move or what he had to accomplish. He was simply being. And in that moment, he knew that he was exactly where he needed to be. But even as Jordan found clarity in his own heart, he couldn't escape the questions that still lingered. What would he do with all this newfound understanding? How could he take these lessons and apply them to the rest of his life? It was a question he had been grappling with since his journey began. How do you move forward once you've found your true purpose? Jordan knew that the next chapter of his life was waiting, but it wasn't as clear-cut as the paths he had once considered. It wasn't about following a formula, it was about creating something uniquely his own. The answer, as Jordan soon realized, wasn't something he would find on a map or in the advice of others. It was something he had to create for himself, one step at a time. And that was the adventure that lay before him. That night, as Jordan lay in his tent under a blanket of stars, he thought about everything he had learned so far. The fear, the doubts, the desire to follow a prescribed path, he had confronted them all. And now, at this point in his life, he felt ready to embrace whatever came next. He didn't need a clear, detailed plan. He just needed to trust that the journey would unfold as it was meant to. As the wind whispered through the trees, Jordan closed his eyes and let out a deep breath. The future was uncertain, yes. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of the unknown. He was excited by it. Jordan sat quietly on the edge of the pier, watching the waves roll in rhythm with the setting sun. His time traveling had allowed him to immerse himself in experiences and meet people who lived life differently than what he had been taught. Now, months had passed, and with each new place he visited, he felt more sure of one thing: he was not going to go back to the life he had once planned for himself. The world was vast, full of opportunities, and he didn't need to follow a conventional path to find his place in it. But as peaceful as the present moment felt, Jordan knew that he had come to a crossroads, again. The questions had shifted from, "What am I supposed to do?" to, "What do I want to do?" For all the insights he had gained on his travels, the answer was still unclear. A breeze swept through the air, and Jordan's thoughts were interrupted by the voice of Maya, who had flown out to join him for a week of reflection. She had become one of the few constants in his life, always pushing him toward deeper truths and offering support when he needed it the most. "I can't believe how much you've changed," Maya said, sitting down next to him. Her face was sun-kissed, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "It's like I'm talking to a completely different person than the one I saw graduate last year." Jordan smiled, a bit sheepish. "I feel like I am a different person. I've learned so much, but I still don't know exactly what I'm supposed to do with it all." Maya looked at him, her expression softening. "You know, Jordan, it's okay not to have all the answers right away. You've spent years focusing on what other people think you should do. Now, you're doing something brave, you're creating your own path." Jordan nodded slowly, grateful for her perspective. He had spent so long thinking that he needed to have everything figured out by a certain age, by a certain time. But now, the idea of a preordained timeline seemed irrelevant. Maybe it wasn't about having all the answers. Maybe it was about taking the first step, even if the path ahead wasn't entirely visible. "I guess that's what scares me," Jordan admitted, his voice low. "I've never had to do something without a clear map to follow. But you're right. I don't want to just follow a script anymore. I want to build something real, something that feels like me." Maya smiled, her voice filled with conviction. "You've already started building it, Jordan. You don't need a map, just trust yourself. Trust the experiences you've had and the person you're becoming. You're capable of so much more than you give yourself credit for." Jordan felt a surge of hope at her words. For the first time in a while, he felt like he was finally beginning to understand what it meant to be in control of his own destiny. He wasn't just a product of the system, of his education, or the expectations of others. He was his own person, with the ability to shape his future. The next morning, Jordan woke up early to the sound of birds chirping outside his window. The room was bathed in golden light, and for a moment, he simply lay there, soaking in the tranquility of the moment. It felt as though the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for him to make his next move. With renewed clarity, he stood up and grabbed his journal. He had made a habit of journaling during his travels, reflecting on the lessons he had learned and the challenges he had faced. But this time, it was different. This time, he wasn't just writing about the past or the present, he was writing about his future. He scribbled down a few lines. "I don't know where I'm going, but I'm ready to go there. I've spent my whole life trying to fit into a mold, but I'm done with that. I'm ready to create my own mold, my own shape. I'm not going to be defined by the success others expect of me. I'm going to define success for myself. And I'll take each step with courage, even when I don't have all the answers." Jordan paused, his pen still hovering over the page. There was something incredibly freeing about giving himself permission to forge ahead without having everything planned out. He was no longer waiting for some grand revelation to hit him, he was stepping into the unknown and trusting that the pieces would fall into place. Later that day, Jordan and Maya sat in a small cafe by the beach, sipping their coffee and watching the waves crash against the shore. The conversation drifted to plans, as it often did, but this time, Jordan felt no pressure to have a clear answer. He simply shared his thoughts as they came. "I think I'm going to start by working with some local organizations," Jordan said, his eyes bright. "I've always been passionate about education, and I've seen firsthand how important it is in the communities I've visited. Maybe I'll even create a platform for people to share their stories, to connect across cultures, to inspire each other." Maya raised an eyebrow. "That sounds amazing. But you don't want to rush into something because it sounds good. You need to make sure it's something you truly care about." Jordan nodded, feeling a sense of certainty growing within him. "I do care about it. I think it's the perfect blend of what I've learned and what I feel passionate about. I don't know exactly how it will take shape, but I think this is the direction I want to move in." Maya smiled, her eyes filled with encouragement. "Then that's what you should do. But remember, it's a journey. Don't feel like you have to have all the answers now. Take the next step and let everything else unfold." Jordan's heart swelled with gratitude. He had been searching for answers in places outside himself, in degrees and titles, in the validation of others. But the truth was that the answers had always been inside him. He didn't need to have everything figured out right now. He just needed to trust the process and take action. A few weeks later, Jordan returned home, ready to start taking the first steps toward his new path. He didn't know where it would lead, but he knew that he was finally in control of his own destiny. He reached out to organizations, began crafting ideas for his platform, and, most importantly, started listening to his heart. As the months passed, Jordan's project began to take shape. He spoke to people from all walks of life, all over the world. The stories he heard, the connections he made, fueled his purpose in a way that no career path or prestigious degree ever could. He was creating something meaningful, something that felt true to who he was. And so, Jordan's journey continued. It was no longer about seeking approval or fitting into a mold. It was about forging his own path, taking risks, and creating something that truly mattered. The fear of the unknown had been replaced with excitement and curiosity. The future was still unwritten, but that was okay. Jordan knew that whatever came next, he was ready for it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?